afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Cheddar's CannaBiz. I'm Chloe Aiello.
And I'm Brad Smith. Thank you all so much for being here today. Great to see you, Chloe. It has been a banner year for the world of weed. Today, we'll take a look back at how 2020 made marijuana essential.
That's right. We'll break down the major events impacting the cannabis market this year and what the future holds. First, we'll hear from Vivien Azer. She's the Director and Senior Research Analyst at Cowen, about what a Biden presidency means for marijuana policy in the new year, and how Biden went from gateway drug to possible cannabis champion in one election cycle.
Plus, the U.S. made history in 2020, passing the first bill decriminalizing marijuana through the House with the MORE Act. Stephen Hawkins, who is the executive director of the Marijuana Policy Project, will talk to us about whether this liberal idea may actually be gaining some Republican support.
And we'll talk to Curaleaf president and incoming CEO Joe Bayern about why his company stands to benefit most from the 2020 election.
And finally, New Jersey became just the latest major state to legalize marijuana this year. Dianna Houenou, who's the chair of the Cannabis Regulatory Commission in New Jersey, and Kaliko Castille, the vice president of Minority Cannabis Business Association and CEO of ThndrStrm, joins us to discuss what is next for the Garden State's Green Initiative, Chloe.
Oh, 2020, Brad. It's been quite a year, bringing terrible lows, but also unexpected flickers of optimism. And this contrast is especially true for the maturing cannabis industry. 2020 was already slated to be a year of reckoning for cannabis companies. They entered January humbled by a market correction and a crunch on capital. Add a global pandemic to the mix, and times were tough. Companies across the industry were hit with supply chain disruptions, closures, and layoffs. But then, something amazing happened. San Francisco Mayor London Breed declared cannabis an essential business, allowed to operate amid the coronavirus lockdown. Governors in almost every legal state followed suit. So even in the darkness of the pandemic, the industry allowed itself this win. ETF Managers Group's Jason Wilson said recovery of his ETF MJ reflects the impact of that designation. Here's Wilson.
What was most impressive specifically with respect to the cannabis industry is it rebounded fiercely. As you mentioned, MJ's up over 50% from its lows. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that cannabis-related businesses, many of them were deemed essential across the globe, not just in the United States.
The news improved from there. A spike in sales from pre-lockdown stocking up became a trend of stronger overall sales. Experts wondered whether cannabis was as recession-proof as alcohol. Companies upgraded their technology to keep up. E-commerce, contactless payments, delivery. The pandemic accelerated the kind of innovation that could have otherwise taken years. Then came the election. President-elect Joe Biden chose Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as his running mate. Her law enforcement past worried advocates, but others felt she might push Biden left on cannabis. Plus, calls for racial justice and drug decriminalization became more relevant than ever amid a nationwide reckoning with systemic racism after the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. House Democrats listened, passing Harris's sweeping and progressive MORE Act. Congressional Cannabis Caucus co-chair Barbara Lee praised the bill. Here's the Congresswoman.
We made a historic vote, that's something that has never happened before in terms of descheduling and decriminalizing marijuana and cannabis. But we have a long way to go, but this is going to take all of us. That's how democracy works.
Plus, after a contentious election that cannabis clearly won, with 5 states passing 6 measures to kick off adult use and medical cannabis markets, the United Nations acknowledged cannabis's medical utility. It seemed that finally the winds of politics were blowing in the cannabis industry's favor. Of course, if 2020 was any example, 2021 will still be difficult as the pandemic rages on. And so much of cannabis's political future depends on which party wins the runoff elections in Georgia. If Democrats claim those seats, ETF Managers Group Jason Wilson anticipates more consolidation. Here's Wilson.
That could really be a catalyst. If it ends up with the Dems having full control of Congress and the White House, we could see substantive reform, and we could see a lot of M&A activity in the cannabis industry.
And this won't just be any M&A. Long gone are the land-grabbing, cash-flush days before the cannabis market rout. Many companies these days are tighter with their purse strings, cleaning house, cutting costs, and making strategic acquisitions only. Wilson had some color to add on that as well. Here's Wilson.
they've come to the realization that they have to run like any other CPG company, and they're focusing on synergistic acquisitions to basically get their products into expanded marketplaces.
And just as the year is about to come to a close, a major M&A deal sprouted. Tilray and Aphria announcing plans to merge in an all-stock deal that values the combined company at $3.8 billion. The deal will create the world's largest cannabis company by revenue. The new company will keep Tilray's name and could surpass industry leaders Curaleaf and Canopy Growth in size. So Democrats haven't even won the runoff elections, and M&A in the cannabis space is already heating up. But even if Democrats lose in Georgia, states have historically been the vanguard of legalization. And the economic destruction wrought by the pandemic only helps cannabis's cause. Leaders in states like New York and Pennsylvania are itching for a new source of tax revenue. And with New Jersey just a stone's throw away, experts like attorney Jessica Gonzalez expect Jersey to precipitate a lot of local movement. Here's Gonzalez.
New Jersey is really going to be that domino that once it falls, it's going to catalyze the Northeast, right? Massachusetts is a little too far to really have that sort of an impact, but New Jersey is right smack dab in the middle of some of the states with one very high density population, but we're also right across the river from the largest cannabis consumer market in the world, which is New York.
It's hard to know what the future holds, but after years of battling complex regulations, substantial taxes, and some very powerful opponents, the cannabis industry has demonstrated it is more resilient than most. And coming up, we're taking a closer look at what a Biden administration could mean for cannabis policy in the U.S. in 2021. See you after the break. Welcome back to Cheddar's CannaBiz, everyone. President Trump and President-elect Biden took dramatically different stances on many issues and policies during the election. But when it comes to the topic of cannabis, supporters found more promise in a Biden administration versus a second Trump term. Joining us now is Vivien Azer. She's the Managing Director and Senior Research Analyst at Cowen. Vivien, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, good to be with you.
We know President-elect Biden was the most conservative Democratic presidential contender in the 2020 field, but many are now viewing his administration as pro-reform, especially with VP Harris at his side. Do you share this enthusiasm? Why or why not?
You know, we do. We don't think that he's going to be super progressive in terms of, pushing for a full descheduling of cannabis. But clearly, his administration has shown an openness to progress. And that really even started before he selected VP-elect Harris for the ticket, where he did sign kind of a unified agreement with Bernie Sanders that did include the decriminalization of cannabis.
Obviously, amid the coronavirus pandemic, this administration does have a lot on its plate. So to what degree do you actually think they will prioritize cannabis?
Well, I think, as you rightly pointed out, a lot of it does come down to the Senate. And to the extent that the Democrats are able to take both seats in the Georgia special, then we would expect to see progress coming out of Congress. And specifically, what we're envisioning is a modified version of a piece of legislation called the States Act. That would not allow for interstate commerce, but it would make operating at the state level much easier, and it would have meaningful capital markets implications. We do think that a modified version of that piece of legislation would allow the U.S. plant-touching operators that currently list on Canadian exchanges to then be able to relist on major U.S. exchanges like the NYSE and the NASDAQ. It would offer access to commercial banking, and it would eliminate a very onerous piece of the tax code called 280E, which essentially says that state-level legal cannabis operators cannot take normal operating deductions from a tax standpoint, and so they're essentially taxed on gross profit.
So as you mentioned, a lot is riding on those elections in Georgia. Can you break down a little bit more for us what might happen either way, depending which party wins? Which bills could we expect to actually see go into law next session?
Sure. So if the Republicans maintain control of the Senate, the best that we think you can get is the Safe Banking Act. And that really would only address access to commercial banking. If the Democrats take control of the Senate, there are really two pieces of legislation that we can debate. One is the States Act that I just described. The other is the MORE Act. And you talked about that in your earlier segment, which passed the House House, but we do not think we'll see the light of day in the Senate. That view holds even if the Democrats take control of the Senate. The MORE Act would be, essentially a full legalization bill, and we think that would be really challenging with a slim majority for the Democrats in the Senate, even for progressive Democrats.
Definitely.
And for moderate Democrats.
Absolutely. And, speaking of the Senate, a lot of people are saying that it's going to start to warm to cannabis as we see more of these traditionally red states get their cannabis markets online. Do you agree with this assessment? And if so, kind of how long do you think that would actually take?
Well, certainly. I think, two of the biggest surprises for me coming out of the November election was that Montana and South Dakota both legalized adult use cannabis fully. And, those are traditionally deep Republican red states. And then Mississippi legalized for medical. So you've just added 6 new cannabis senators to the Republican rosters.
And you provided the perfect segue to my next question, because I was going to ask you about these state level legalization. We saw 5 states approving 6 measures for adult use and medical, plus a potential domino effect in the Northeast. What kind of impact overall is this going to have on the industry, especially with respect to its existing operators?
We absolutely think the domino is going to happen. So it's pretty easy to size what the impact of the 5 states that passed ballot initiatives could look like. And we think that's an incremental $3 billion revenue opportunity by 2025. But the real meaningful impact is going to be New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and potentially Pennsylvania, which we have included in our modeling. As you guys have rightly pointed out, the Democratic governor is very pro adult use. The limiting factor historically has been that the state assembly is Republican controlled. But given COVID budget deficits and the very close geographic proximity of all of these states in the Northeast and the risk of cross-border arbitrage, we do think Pennsylvania would be set to legalize. Net, those 4 states would add another $6 billion to our 2025 estimate. So pre-election, we were at $31 billion by 2025, and post-election, we're now at 40. And to put that in context, we think 2020 is going to finish the year with $20 billion in legal cannabis sales.
And looking ahead to 2021, which companies do you think are best positioned to take advantage of this tremendous political traction that we saw in the election?
Yeah, within my coverage universe, our best idea is Green Thumb Industries. They're in close to a dozen states with nearly 50 operating dispensaries, deep presence in Illinois, deep presence in Pennsylvania, as well as a presence in New Jersey and New York. In addition, Curaleaf, and you're going to have Joe on in a little bit, they're the largest operator in the country with close to 100 operating dispensaries. They absolutely will be able to benefit from this, in particular, given their concentration throughout the Northeast. And then we also like Cresco Labs, which is Illinois-based.
Now, in one of your reports that you put out recently, you were stressing the importance of these companies with these big footprints and this big scale, leveraging that into the new year. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that and what it would look like to see one of these companies take advantage of that footprint?
Yeah, so what we're seeing already is the benefits of scale. That has really been the theme through 2020. As revenues continue to materialize, all of the early investments in terms of infrastructure, in terms of building out cultivation, in terms of building retail footprint and manufacturing processes, that all costs money up front. And then as the revenues start to kick in, that's where you can see the profits flow through. And I think, the biggest positive surprise that we've seen from 2020 is that several of these large operators are already posting adjusted EBITDA or profit margins that are in line with traditional consumer staples.
Absolutely. Now, what other kinds of trends are we expecting that we maybe haven't covered so far as we head into the new year?
Yeah, so we think that the continued destigmatization of cannabis will continue. Gallup polling continues to improve. Most recently, it said 68% support for adult use cannabis, and that actually has a knock-on effect in terms of consumer behavior. One thing we've been able to identify in looking at national government data from the NSDUH is that cannabis first use is substantially higher in states where consumers have access to adult use cannabis than in those that don't. So we would expect that as many as 9 states, legalize cannabis over the next 2 years, you're going to see an expanding consumer base attached to that.
Absolutely, and that is Vivien Azer, Managing Director and Senior Research Analyst at Cowen. Vivien, thank you so much for joining us today. And coming up, the 2020 presidential election went blue, but Curaleaf says Election Day resulted in a green landslide. We explain why, next. Welcome back to Cheddar's CannaBiz, everyone. Joe Biden was powered to victory in the 2020 presidential election by blue states, but even some traditionally red states are now going green. Cannabis multi-state operator Curaleaf, which saw a massive revenue last quarter, expects to see more gains after 2 of its key markets voted to legalize adult-use cannabis. Joining us now is Joe Bayern. He's the president and incoming CEO at Curaleaf. Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Now, your company's chairman, Boris Jordan, termed the 2020 election results a, quote, green landslide. How do you expect this election will serve as an inflection point for cannabis?
Yeah, I think it's going to just provide further evidence that cannabis is becoming more mainstream and that U.S. consumers want access to high quality, affordable cannabis products. And the recent election results are just another step toward what we believe is a national trend towards legalizing cannabis in the United States.
Now, of all the multi-state operators here in the U.S., Curaleaf is perhaps most uniquely positioned to take advantage of these election results, as you have operations in both New Jersey and Arizona, 2 of the markets that people were most excited about. So how is it that you plan to leverage your presence there moving forward?
Yeah, we're well positioned not only in Arizona and New Jersey, but actually we have a very strong position across 23 states in the U.S. So I think we're really uniquely poised to take advantage of what's going to be happening in the U.S. cannabis marketplace. Specifically in those markets, we've been preparing for a while for adult use. So we've been building out our capacity. We've been hiring people in those markets, and we're preparing ourselves for what could be dramatic increases in revenue over the next 12, 24 months, not only in Arizona, but across the U.S.
Now, we know that in the aftermath of New Jersey's decision, we are expecting surrounding states like Connecticut, Pennsylvania to sort of domino effect toward legalization. Why is this region key for both Curaleaf and the growing adult use cannabis market more broadly?
Yeah, I think it's key to the marketplace because it's just a large addressable marketplace. Like any other consumer product industry, places like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, not only provide a great opportunity for us to build a scalable business because there's a lot of density, but it's also a place where brands are built and influences reside. So I think people look to key markets like New York, like LA, like Miami as a way to influence the rest of the U.S. population. So we really see it upside in twofold. One is the addressable market is large, high density, and we have good capacity. As you know, we started in the Northeast. We have a lot of capacity in the Northeast, but it also is a way to help influence other people across the U.S. about the benefits of cannabis.
Now, we had Cowen analyst Vivien Azer on just now, who was talking about some of the key themes that we saw in 2020 and moving into 2021. One is how these large operators, including Curaleaf, of course, can maintain and leverage their scale. Curaleaf was the largest operator by revenue in the U.S., perhaps maybe being supplanted by the Afria-Tilray deal coming up here soon. But how is it that you intend to use your growth to leverage your profits and your scale moving forward?
Yeah, I think you hit on 2 key topics, which is improving scale and improving profitability. But at Curaleaf, we really have a long-term vision of what we're trying to build, and that's about building a national platform to create brands. We believe that, as we said, every consumer in the U.S. can benefit from cannabis. In order to do that, we need to make sure that we're creating brands that people love and trust, and we're creating products that meet the needs of those consumers. And in order to do that, you need to have a national platform, not only for capacity, but also for distribution and the ability to have retail outlets for those products. So we are gaining scale every month. We're continuing to build out capacity, build out our footprint. We're getting operationally efficient every month as we gain scale, get improved efficiencies. But really, our long-term vision is to create brands in the marketplace, national brands. And in order to do that, we need to have a national footprint, and that's what we're very focused on. It's very simple for us. We have a very simple mission. We want to help improve lives every day by providing clarity around cannabis and around confidence around consumption. And in order to do that, not only in our 23 states, but across the U.S., we need to continue to invest in our platform, our capacity, and our people.
Certainly, and we do know that, brand building is incredibly important to cannabis companies these days, if difficult, as companies head toward the CPG company designation. Now, I do want to switch gears here and talk about politics for a minute. So we know the House passed the MORE Act in early December. Curaleaf applauded that initiative to, sort of resolve the conflict between federal and state positions on cannabis. But there were some areas that you felt were lacking. Can you tell us a little bit about what the bill needed, in your opinion?
Well, I think the bill is certainly a positive step in the right direction. Again, just to reiterate, we believe that all Americans should have access to high quality, affordable cannabis products. So this is one step closer to that goal. But I think we also have to look at how this could be rolled out in a reasonable and a responsible way across the U.S. And I think ensuring that we have high quality standards, testing standards are part of it, of course. But we need to think about how the market and how the industry will interact between a federal platform and a state level platform. So I think we're very focused on helping to not only build out a state by state model and work with legislators in each state, but I think we need to now think about what this could look like on a national platform and what is the role of the federal government versus the state governments, and how that should be controlled in order to continue to grow this marketplace. And I think that's really important for us because, again, we're very focused on just helping to improve people's lives, and we want to ensure that that's being done as efficiently as possible.
Now, I know there were some other concerns with the bill as well, some advocates fearing that amendments added in at the 11th hour kind of hollowed out its equity provisions, which is a lot of what the MORE Act was about. Now, I know Curaleaf is big on corporate social responsibility, on equity. Do you share this concern, and what would you like to see in terms of more equity perhaps added to this bill or one like it moving forward?
Yeah, we are working with legislators all the time to try to make sure that we're creating, again, a comprehensive and a fair platform for cannabis across the U.S. We're not going to potentially weigh in on what all the nuances of that legislation look like. At Curaleaf, we're really focused on how do we continue to create opportunities for people in the marketplace, whether they're local within social equity communities or on a more national level. How do we continue to build programs that actually could benefit our consumers and our communities? So reinvesting back into those communities, providing programs for mentorship with social equity applicants, working with social equity partners, either as suppliers and or joint venture partners in some of our states, are really the things we're focused on. Is how do we create an ecosystem where people can be rewarded and see the benefits of the cannabis industry. And I think by focusing on that, we'll be able to create a lot of opportunities across a lot of different geographies and social platforms.
Joe, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. We'll hope you'll come back and join us again soon. That's Joe Bayern, President and incoming CEO at Careleaf. And coming up, the House passes the historic MORE Act, but that doesn't mean activist work is done. The Marijuana Policy Project joins us with more after the break.
Welcome back to Cheddar's CannaBiz, everyone. The passage of the MORE Act in the House of Representatives is a major milestone for cannabis policy reform in the U.S., but some argue it doesn't go far enough when it comes to making a meaningful change. Joining us now is Stephen Hawkins, who is the Executive Director of the Marijuana Policy Project. Stephen, great to have you here with us on the day. You say that the MORE Act falls short of a perfect bill. Why is that?
Well, it fell short because of some of the provisions within the bill that would have made it far more difficult to implement. But having said that, the MORE Act was incredibly historic, and now the real push will be to see what we can accomplish in the Senate. The House has done its work. It has put forward a historic bill that would deschedule cannabis and make it possible for states to move forward with legalization. But now our work is really going to have to be focused at the U.S. Senate in this next session of Congress.
Describe those conversations that you anticipate taking place within the Senate. What changes do you expect that they'll want to see, and how do you think that the MORE Act would perhaps need to change to be fully effective once it makes it through the Senate?
Well, there will have to be three core, tenets of whatever emerges from the Senate, because it may not be the MORE Act as we know it. I mean, the Senate is going to focus on a bill most likely of its own. But to me, whatever emerges has to have three core tenets. One certainly is to deschedule cannabis, not rescheduled anywhere on the Controlled Substance Act, but descheduled. The second has to include expungement to clear past convictions at the federal level, because that gives certainly that gives a signal for the states to do the same. And then lastly, really to leave it to the states to then determine their own tax and regulatory schemes. That doesn't mean that there won't be aspects that will have to have federal regulation and jurisdictional authorities, but to leave the bulk of that to the states.
And so the MORE Act Republican supporter, Congressman Matt Gaetz, discussed cannabis as a generational issue versus a partisan one at a time where we know both parties are vying for the attention of the next generation. I want to play a quick clip from the congressman.
This issue divides as much along generational lines as among partisan lines. So maybe the answer isn't trying to convince a bunch of boomer Republicans to alter views that they've had for decades. Maybe the answer is to work with some of the younger Republicans.
Hearing that, do you think that Republicans are becoming more open to the idea of cannabis on a whole?
I think that there are certainly views that are changing within the Republican Party, as we're seeing in American society as a whole. The polling shows that even adults over 65, there's a majority of support for cannabis legalization. But having said that, there are new members within the Republican Party that are supportive of legalization. We will need, if we are to see any success in the Senate, we would need to get 10 Republican senators at the very least. The other, I think, change that's critical, that beyond just age, is geography. We are beginning to see more and more states, both red and blue, pass legalization. This past election day was proof. We saw 3 states, Montana, South Dakota, and Mississippi, all red states, especially South Dakota, deep red state, all passed legalization either of adult use or medical, along with states like New Jersey, which are in the blue category. So what is it showing is that there is broad support for cannabis legalization that crosses party lines.
Sure.
And that, I think, will build the support that we will need in Congress, because Congress people will begin to hear more from their district offices, more from their own constituents,
right,
in support of seeing the federal prohibition end.
And Stephen, just while we have you, you mentioned such a key factor in all of this, and a Gallup poll actually supports the very point that you were making. Gallup poll showing support for marijuana legalization is at a new high of 68%. Do you see this upward trend continuing?
I do. I do. It is continuing. It is showing that we have broad support among the American electorate. And it's showing that support is crosses political ideologies. So for me, it's just simply a matter of getting, I think, the critical mass of support we will need in Congress. But when I look at the fact that South Dakota has now legalized both for medical and adult use in this last election, that will ultimately begin to influence the thoughts of Senator Thune on the issue, of Senator Rounds. So we will see new allies and supporters emerge in Congress.
Certainly. Whether it be for recreational or healthcare reform or criminal justice reform, with more millennial and Gen Z voters coming forward, how do you think that they will be lending their voice to the overall cannabis reform on the horizon?
They will be a powerful voice. There's certainly overwhelming support among the younger electorate. We may see that support not only manifest itself around legalization, but then everything that comes afterwards. As we know, states have had to rethink delivery during the pandemic, rethink how stores operate. And I think we will see changes after legalization in the regulatory way that will benefit consumers. And I would imagine that that those younger generations will help to drive that change.
Stephen Hawkins, who's the executive director of the Marijuana Policy Project. Thank you so much for the time here today. All right, everyone, and coming up, we're breaking down marijuana as a social justice issue and how leaders can make the business sector more inclusive. Stay tuned, we've got that coming up. Hey everyone, welcome back to Cheddar's CannaBiz. As cannabis decriminalization gains traction across the U.S., business regulation and social justice are emerging as key issues. Joining us now is Dianna Houenou, who is the chair of the Cannabis Regulatory Commission in New Jersey, and also Kaliko Castille, who is the vice president of the Minority Cannabis Business Association and CEO of ThndrStrm Strategies. Great to have you both here with us today. Dianna, first question goes to you. What is your first order of business to ensure racial equality in the cannabis sector?
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you and you, Kaliko. So the first order of business really will be to make sure that everyone in the Cannabis Regulatory Commission in New Jersey is up to speed on the new laws that are going to be in place. And then once that has happened, we really have to hit the pavement. I want us to be out in the community so that people know who we are, what we're about, and what our vision is for the cannabis industry in New Jersey. And then we've got to get to work. We've got a lot of work to do to make sure that equity is at the forefront through our regulations. And I'm excited for the opportunity to start that work.
Mm-hmm. Kaliko, what will it take to make the cannabis business world more accessible to people of color? What actionable steps are being taken even as we speak? And what does the roadmap look like?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think from a high level, and getting into the actionable, is that ultimately, as Dianna was saying, social justice and social equity needs to be at the sort of center of this conversation. And I think one of the pieces that kind of often gets left out of that conversation is this portion of economic justice, right? And I think that's where we're talking about being able to make sure that minority cannabis business owners have access to the market, whether that's having priority access to the marketplace because they've been disproportionately impacted, or whether that's being able to have funds available so that these cannabis business owners are able to start up their businesses without having to go out for, I would say, vulture capitalism, vulture capitalist dollars to run their businesses. So I think it's really important that we are creating pathways to access, both through priority licensing structures and also through reduced fees, as well as access to capital and also business development services, so that these small businesses are able to compete in the marketplace against some well-capitalized businesses.
Let me insert some statistical trends into this conversation just to give a sense of how important this topic is. The ACLU data shows the black arrest rate for marijuana possession is significantly higher than the white arrest rate. Dianna, what would you say to those who don't believe that this is a civil rights issue?
Well, I do what you just did and show them the numbers. Really, the numbers don't lie here. With Black people across the country being disproportionately arrested for cannabis possession, in New Jersey, they're more than 3 times more likely to be arrested for possession. these have very real impacts on people. And, with the collateral consequences that come along with an arrest, it doesn't affect just an individual who's arrested, but these are things that affect entire families and whole communities. I mean, when we're pulling people out of the workforce, when we're pulling people out of education and out of housing options, what are we doing to our communities? We really should be looking at this from a holistic perspective to make sure that we're taking care of everyone in all of our communities.
As we create these opportunities, Kaliko, I wonder, what are some of the most commonly asked questions that you're hearing from minority entrepreneurs wanting to break into the cannabis space?
I mean, just as simple as, how do I get in, right? And I think that a lot of the times that conversation ends up centering around, how can I fund my business? I think in a lot of places, especially East Coast states that are looking to come online like New Jersey and elsewhere, I think those are places that's going to take a lot of startup capital in order to run a cannabis business. It's not 2010 in Denver where people were able to start up with a half pound and a couple $1,000s. Like, I do think it's ultimately trying to get access to capital, is trying to get access to business development services. A lot of folks who are coming from the traditional market and then trying to get in to the regulated marketplace, a lot of those folks have never ran a business before. They don't know what it's like to run a P&L sheet. They don't know what it's like to pitch for investment. They don't know what it's like to make sure that they're not getting screwed when it comes to those investment parameters. So I think it's just really important that we're giving access to people so that they can educate themselves. And that's where it's really important, as we're writing these laws and as we're writing regulations, that we're making sure that equity, especially economic justice, is at the core of that conversation.
I want to allow this last question for the both of you. What is the biggest hurdle to a marijuana space that is inclusive and equal, and what are some of the first steps that we need to be taking in order to get there? Dianna, I want to start with you.
So here in New Jersey, I think, we really need to be leaning into this space. We're going to be starting something new that's never been done before in New Jersey, developing a regulated, legalized cannabis industry. But the good thing is, there are networks of regulators across the country, advocates like the MCBA, who have been doing great work to make sure that we share as much information as we can about all the creative ideas that people have been bringing to the table to make sure that we are offering meaningful opportunities for people to have ownership opportunities here, to get a job, to operate a business themselves and have some ownership. Equity. And so I think it's imperative that we be mindful that we are leaning into these new spaces, but not shy away from that either. We need to be willing to revisit any laws or regulations that aren't working for us so that we can continue down the path for equity.
And Kaliko, same question over to you in the City of Roses. How do we make sure that this is inclusive, equitable? What are the biggest hurdles, and what's the first step that you need to see taken in order for this to be reversed and rectified?
Yeah, thanks. I think Dianna really hit the nail on the head. It's education ultimately, right? I mean, we're dealing with trying to overcome decades of misinformation when it comes to cannabis and cannabis policy, and ultimately these elected officials have spent their entire careers not wanting or not willing to learn about cannabis, and now they're having to do that in a reduced time frame. So I think when Dianna's talking about being able to get out into the community and really listen to the voices of stakeholders who have been on the ground in various places throughout the country, trying to come up with innovative ideas to reach this sort of goal of a diverse and inclusive industry, I think is super important. I really think it comes down to education, and it comes down to a willingness to try, right? And I think the timing is perfect with this sort of social justice conversation with the George Floyd and everything else around Black Lives Matter. Now is the time to get serious about having these tough conversations and ultimately starting to dismantle the systems that have led us to this moment.
Excellent insights from both of you. Enjoyed this conversation. Dianna Houenou, who is the chair of the Cannabis Regulatory Commission in New Jersey, and also Kaliko Castille, who is the vice president of the Minority Cannabis Business Association and CEO of ThndrStrm Strategies. Thank you both for joining us here today. Guys, coming up, cannabis companies are known for their intricate name products, so we thought we'd test our knowledge in a game of real or fake. That's after the break.
Welcome back to Cheddar's CannaBiz, everybody. All right, Brad, we thought we'd end today on a fun note.
Yeah.
The cannabis industry is known, of course, for its crazy names and at times its even crazier products. So we decided to take that and turn it into a game. The game is real or fake. Brad, you're going to need to guess if a product is real or, wait for it, fake.
Wait, you're not guessing either? It's
No.
just me. It's me versus the house.
I mean, I know the answers already. So
Okay.
it's
All right.
it's all on you.
All right, bring it on.
All right, so our first one, it is a strain of cannabis called Bob Saget OG. Real or fake?
Okay. I mean, Bob Saget, comedian, I guess they would, for comedic purposes, name a strain after Bob Saget. He seems pretty relaxed as dad on Full House, so yeah, why not? Yes, it's real.
And drumroll, please. You're right, it's real.
Okay, all right.
So the thinking here, it's named after actor, comedian, and TV host Bob Saget. It's perfect for enjoying Full House reruns and a mix of Afghani and pre-98 Bubba Kush. And if you think about it, Bob Saget taught us how to laugh at ourselves with America's funniest home videos, just like cannabis sometimes does.
The question is, what are you eating in addition to this strain while you are watching Full House reruns? Because you can't just watch one. You have to sit down. You got to really camp out.
It's got to be an all-day affair.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm thinking lots of snacks.
I don't know. All right.
All right. Up next, this is another cannabis strain, and it is influenced by one of our favorite latest shows, Rick and Morty, Bird Person.
Oh, man. I thought this was going to be influenced by, oh, my goodness, what's his name? Chris Anderson, the old Denver Nuggets basketball player, where we know in Colorado cannabis is widely accepted. Well, since it's Rick and Morty, I'm going to go with fake. But if it was the basketball player, I was going to go with real.
Oh, no. I think I gave it away. You're right. It is fake.
Okay.
So this one I came up with because I love Rick and Morty, but it was named after Rick's best friend, Bird Person, who falls in love with Amber's family friend, Tammy. She's secretly a spy for the Galactic Federation, which of course brings Bird Person's downfall. Now this sounds crazy, but there actually is a Rick and Morty themed cannabis strain.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Wait, so it's true? So it's not real? Or is
It's
it
not
fake?
real. No, it's not real.
Oh, I
Unfortunately.
guess not real and fake are technically the same thing. All right. Okay, what's up next? I think I'm doing pretty good so far.
I mean, you've got 2 for 2. You're doing great.
Let's see how we do here. This one's going to get interesting. I already see it in the prompter.
Okay, this one is the Lafayette Sports Bra, and it is a CBD infused sports bra.
Did you just give it away? Is it real? It's fake. It's got to be fake. Wait, hang on, time out. CBD infused clothing. I know we're there. I've never heard of it. I guess it could be real though. That's my final answer.
Okay, final answer?
Yeah.
You're right, it's real. I feel like I'm giving these away to you, Brad. I don't know.
I mean, the second you said that it is CBD infused, that kind of gave it away to me because there is CBD infused clothing, and I know we've talked about that on the show before too.
Yes, and this particular sports bra, so it contains 4 grams of CBD, and according to the maker, which is Akabata, the bra is targeting upper back muscles for a, quote, proactive recovery. It is not cheap. It'll cost you about $125.
Okay, I'm doing pretty good so far. I don't even
great.
know how to pronounce this last one that's scrolling up right now, so go for it.
Okay, I'm giving you no clues whatsoever on this one.
Okay.
It is Yule Toke.
It's so weird. It has to be real, right? I don't even know what context the name would come from. You gave me nothing.
No hints, no hints.
Okay, all right. Oh, well, I said real, and is it real? Is it fake?
All right, it is fake.
Okay.
So here's the idea
The one
behind
that
this
should
one.
be one is not one.
I know. So what this was envisioned to be is it's for the discreet cannabis lover who wants to be merry this holiday season. Yule Toke is an ornament-shaped stash box and nutcracker pipe to make sure you have a discreet, happy holiday.
Got it. Okay. So on account of technicality, it's not a strain, but it is a product that's in the space then.
No, it's actually inspired by a product.
Inspired by it.
Inspired by it. The
Okay,
real
okay.
product is actually a stash box shaped like a golf ball and a tee.
See, you know my heart. Golf, you got me.
We took it in a Christmas direction because, of course, it is the holidays.
Wisely played, wisely played. It's been a pleasure doing this show with you, Chloe.
Thanks, Brad. Good to see you.
Absolutely. That's it for CannaBiz, everyone. But don't go anywhere. More Cheddar after the break.